Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to this video. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Brock Purdy's contract. In fact, I guess we're not going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to talk all about it during this video. But first, do you remember the good old days, the early days of my YouTube channel when I would talk about Canyon Club Brewery? Well, we're back. I'm going to be talking about it right now. Canyon Club Brewery. If you remember, I talked about how it was going to be opening in the Danville Livery. Well, folks, it is open and it is spectacular. So, anyway, Canyon Club Brewery, two locations, one in Moraga, right down the street from where I live, the other right off of 680 in Danville. They have a wide variety of beer items and drinks, as well as a great restaurant there as well with the tasty bites and everything else. So stop on by the livery in Danville. And if I'm off work in time after the draft, probably Saturday, I fully intend to swing on by. So who knows? If you come by a few hours after the draft concludes on Saturday, you might just see me. Okay, so last week I was on KNBR. I have a gig on KNBR 4 times or 3 times a week, I guess, during the off season, 4 times a week during the regular season, in addition to what I do at NBC Sports Bay Area. But anyway, I was asked last week a couple of times just about Brock Purdy's contract. And a few hours after I talked, my phone started blowing up with what I said, went whatever, became newsy. Oh, and what I did say was that the 49ers have made an offer to Brock Purdy. I said it's kind of sitting out there, and that Brock Purdy and his camp, um, that they haven't accepted that offer. And I did say that Brock Purdy's side is inclined at this point not to take that offer. I think I went on to say is that it's my understanding that it doesn't sound like it's really anything close. But I've also said that this is the way negotiations go. One side presents a proposal, an offer, the other side a counter proposal, counter offer, and then eventually they kind of work back and forth until they find a middle ground. I'll go back to what Jed York, CEO of the 49ers, said at the NFL annual meeting a couple weeks ago in Florida. Um, he said that he feels like something will get done. He said, I feel good. When he's ready, we'll sit down and finish it. It shouldn't be that hard. Well, this is where I kind of differ because the more I look at it, the more difficult I think it is when you think about where the sides are coming from. Quite clearly, the 49ers don't want to pay Brock Purdy a huge sum of money that's going to potentially detract from what the roster can be in the future. At the same time, Brock Purdy's side, his agent Kyle Strongen, negotiating with Parag Marathe on this, and he's going to want to look after his client to make sure that he gets the best possible deal. So I know the 49ers, it just kind of seems to me like they're looking at it like, well, Dak Prescott is making 60 million a year. That's the outlier. Um, Josh Allen's contract, NFL MVP, he's making, reported 55 million per year. So, can it go above 55 million for the league MVP? And the other way to look at it, that's one way to look at it, obviously. The other way to look at it is the percentage of the salary cap. And the salary cap has risen dramatically in recent years. I mean, just think about it. This year, the salary cap went up to 279 million per team, 279.2 million per team to be exact. And that is nearly $24 million more than it was a year ago. So when you look at it that standpoint and you come at it from Brock Purdy's agent side, it's not just the raw number of 60 million a year or 55 million a year or whatever the case may be. It's a percentage of the cap. And when you look at it from that standpoint, the percentage of the cap, well, let's just take Joe Burrow's contract, for instance. He signed a deal 2 years ago, right around the time that Nick Bosa signed his deal with the 49ers. But he signed a deal 2 years ago that pays him 55 million per year. That was at that point, so 2 years ago would have been what, 2023. At that point, the salary cap was 224 million. So his 55 million per year is nearly a quarter, 24.5% of the salary cap for that year. And so today, adjusted for inflation, that number would be 68.3 million. Now, I don't think I mean, I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I would think Brock Purdy is not looking for 68 million. And when I say Brock Purdy, he's not the one doing the negotiations. My guess is that he's being sheltered from all the give and take. That being said, I don't get the sense that there are any negative negotiations going on because you hear from John Lynch, you hear from Kyle Shanahan, and you even hear from Jed York. They don't say anything at all remotely negative about Brock Purdy and his performance with the 49ers, his performance as a leader, how he fits into the locker room, nothing like that. So it's basically just a disagreement on the numbers. And when I say disagreement, again, I just want to backtrack a little bit and just say this is part of the negotiations. The player's side aims high, the team side aims low, and now you got kind of the baselines on either side. You have the floor, you have the ceiling, and then it kind of works somewhere toward the middle. So when I said that I don't get the sense that the sides are close right now, what I'm basically saying is if it were close, they'd have a contract. Well, that would be basically a done deal if the sides are close. Now, and I don't necessarily expect this to happen overnight, but just think about, let's just say one side's asking for 60, the other side is proposing 50 million per year. If one side comes down five, if one side goes up five, boom, 55 million, everybody's happy. So when you look at the percentage of the salary cap, uh, Joe Burrow, again, like an outstanding player, former number one overall pick, all of that, and one of the best three quarterbacks in the NFL. So his percentage of salary cap with the Bengals, 24.5 million. Now you take it to the other side, and these are contracts, signed in recent years. You go down to, 13, 14, 15, and it's Jared Goff and Tua Tagovailoa. Both of those contracts done with Goff with the Lions, Tagovailoa with Miami. They're 53 million per year right there. Um, their contracts, 20.8% of the the salary cap when they signed their deals a year ago. So today that would be 58 million per year. So that's where you're looking at as far as, where the disconnect is or where this gets tricky when you look at, the team looking at the number 60 million, 55 million, 50 million, whatever the case may be, while the player side is saying, don't look at the numbers, look at the percentage. The numbers are what the numbers are. It's the market. That's what you're going to have to pay a quarterback. Now, it's my understanding. It doesn't seem like anything has gotten contentious at this point or acrimonious in any way. The 49ers start their offseason program on Tuesday, April 22nd. That's coming up here. And so I don't get the sense that, there's this backbiting or anything going on, but it's a lot more difficult, a lot more complex than I think that, probably I gave it credit for when the off season began. I thought it'd be done relatively quick and relatively painless, and it still might end up that way. I mean, I know that when you look back in the history of the 49ers here, I mean, they've signed big money contract extensions for their players basically every year since what, 2020, 2019, 2020, I guess it was. I mean, it was it was George Kittle, it was Fred Warner, it was Debo Samuel, it was Nick Bosa, it was Brandon Ayuk, and this year it'll be Brock Purdy. They don't want to stop there. They want to get some other deals done. They do want to sign George Kittle to a new contract and possibly Fred Warner as well. I think where the 49ers need to tighten things up and get better is they just need to get these done, especially maybe not so much with the Purdy contract, although there is this other element of just eliminate the drama. Last offseason, so much drama with Brandon Ayuk and with Trent Williams. The drama with Christian McCaffrey wasn't so much of a drama. It never really got out there too much. He didn't really miss any time during the offseason program. He wasn't showing up, but that deal was done, I would say, in a relatively painless manner. But, I think where the 49ers have erred in some of these cases, many of these cases, is they need to be more proactive. And, I think it hurt them with Dre Greenlaw, for instance, by not giving their best or even remotely close to their best offer early on. It allowed him to hit the open market, get a contract from the Broncos, verbally agree to the contract with the Broncos, and then the 49ers came back. The flight that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan made to meet with Greenlaw. Now, that might end up, you never know how things are going to turn out. That might end up being a blessing for the 49ers when you consider, what was the main thought about Dre Greenlaw. What was the risk involved? It's the physical. It's the injuries that he's had. His history of injuries with the Achilles and some other things. So that one, you never know how these contracts are going to turn out, how it's going to be looked upon later. But that's one where if the 49ers really wanted to keep him and they were determined to keep him, they could have kept him with a contract that took him off the market right away. But as it turned out, when that price rised, the price was risen, whatever, the price rose to the point where the Broncos got him. Maybe that it was too much, but it was certainly something the 49ers wanted to do to keep him. They just couldn't at that point. It was too late. And I would say the same thing goes for the George Kittle contract this offseason, where Trey McBride is now the highest paid tight end in the league, making about 2 million more than the next highest paid tight end in the league, and George Kittle's around 15 million. Now that's probably going to be 20 million a year to keep George Kittle. So that's the quick rundown on, maybe not so quick, but that's a rundown on Brock Purdy's contract, where things stand. As Jed York talked about at the owners' meetings, he said that Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback in the league when everything's taken into consideration, how he fits into Kyle Shanahan's system, what he's asked to do in that offense. And so now it's a matter of the sides getting together and getting it done. And I know, the question is, well, what happens if they don't get it done? Third year. So right now, this offseason is the first time the 49ers and Brock Purdy's side can come together on a new contract. It's written basically it's in the CBA. Draft picks cannot touch their contracts until after the end of their third season. So this is the first offseason they can do that. This is a quarterback who's made basically 1 million a year for his first 3 years. He's severely underpaid. He is scheduled to make 5 million this season, but neither side wants it to come to that. And if we want to play hardball, he would be asked to play for 5 million this year, and then 49ers could franchise him next year. I don't expect any of that to happen. It's just it's too big of a risk for the player, for the team. They don't want to set that standard, or that they don't want to have a situation that lingers with a respected guy in the locker room not being treated fairly. So it doesn't work for either side. And I guess you could look at it like both sides have leverage. The 49ers probably have more leverage because Brock Purdy hasn't made, relatively speaking, much money in his pro football career yet. And as Jed York said, he says, talking about how he's going to become the highest paid player on the 49ers, and also looking at it from the standpoint of how it fits together with the entire roster. He said, part of the cost of signing a franchise quarterback is that you have to make sacrifices elsewhere on the roster. York said, when you make that change, you have to make the sacrifices. It's a decision that we made collectively, and we're hoping we make somebody the highest paid player in the history of our organization. It's a decision we made in the middle of the season. So, what he is saying is that in the middle of the 2024 year, everybody got together and, as far as the consensus and probably unanimous that Brock Purdy is the guy that they want to hitch their wagon to. That's why the 49ers lost a lot more in free agency than they gained. In fact, they didn't gain much at all, but it was the entire idea, even releasing guys like Javon Hargrave and Malik Collins and Leonard Floyd, initially releasing Kyle Juszczyk and then bringing him back when Dre Greenlaw's deal, when that money wasn't used on Dre Greenlaw. All of that was creating salary cap space. It was about kind of clearing the path in the future, get that money off the books now, clear that path in the future for when Brock Purdy's big money kicks in. So that's it. That's the rundown. The sides are apart, quite obviously. And just to reiterate what Jed York says, or what he said, is that when they're, what do you say? When he's ready, we'll sit down and finish it. It shouldn't be that hard. So that tells you that the initial steps have been taken. I don't know how initial it is, since here we are toward the end of April, the NFL draft coming up later this week. But the 49ers have not wavered from the stance that Brock Purdy is the quarterback. He will continue to be the quarterback. John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, Jed York have all said that they expect a long future with Brock Purdy. Shanahan and Lynch have both said that as long as they're with the 49ers, they hope that Purdy remains with the 49ers. And now it's just a matter of hammering out the details. So everybody's going to talk about the average per year. But there's also more to it than that. It's guaranteed money, it's signing bonus money, it's how the deal is structured, how much base salary in those final years of the contract, bump that average per year up, how much in the first 3 years. So there's a lot that goes into it, but just remember that when we're talking average per year, not all of these contracts are created equal because of how the salary cap has risen. Folks, the salary cap was $208 million per team in 2022. That's when Kyler Murray signed his contract. Kyler Murray, 46 at that point, 46.1 average per year with inflation. And that was his contract at that time represented 22.1% of the salary cap. So with inflation, his contract now is worth, under that same 22.1%, would be 61.8 million. So you can see why Brock Purdy's side is saying that that number should be a lot higher, towards 60 million, than it should be it should be closer to 60 than 50. That's the disconnect. Happens every year. It's contract negotiations. That's the way it works. All right. So anyway, thank you for tuning in to this video. Again, check me out at Canyon Club. I might be there. I might be there Saturday night after all those undrafted rookies start signing or verbally agreeing to deals. So a big week in 49er land this week as the draft rolls around. And there is your Brock Purdy update. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this element of the 49ers offseason, really, other than the draft. The big to-do, the big thing on the to-do list, getting Brock Purdy signed up for the long term.